think everywhere audit activity has picked up, I suppose.
Yes, sir. They insist for
Physical audit.
physical audit, correct?
No, sir. No.
Ah,
Companies are preferring remote only because expenses are coming down, and auditor do not have a flexibility to ask anything, everything. Whatever they show, only we have to go through. That is my experience in this remote audit. I don't prefer this. Sir.
okay.
A real feel of audit is not in this remote audit.
We had one discussions, I think less than a month back on certain guidelines. So part of that will also be discussed now. So there will be some kind of an overlap there. Okay. So the idea for this particular session was to establish the relationship between Information Technology Act and, of course, whatever we are otherwise focusing, which is the data protection legislation. And we all know that ITA 2000 continues to be the most important legislation as far as any data-related activities are concerned. Though it was amended in 2008, which became effective in 2009, the ministry is actually talking of a further major revision in the act during the current year. So probably this law, which is there now for 22 years, may see another substantial amendment during the current year. We don't know whether that is only to perhaps delay the data protection legislation itself, or there is any real intention of making changes to this particular law. As of now, this law has been slowly getting assimilated by the industry. It took more than 15 years for industry to recognize that there was a law, and only in the last few years its existence has been recognized. And it is only in the recent days with the notifications of certain and others that there is a greater realization about the power of this Information Technology Act. So at this point of time, if it is changed once again, I think we will be back to square one. We'll start studying it right from the beginning. But anyway, because this Data Protection Act, that is the PDP bill, also is in a sort of a very confused state right now. If you take cognizance of one article which appeared today in Hindustan Times, it appears that at least the article says that the government is reconsidering its decision to make the Data Protection Act cover non-personal data also. In fact, this was something which was introduced by JPC in the last few months of PDPB bill revision. And now again, there is at least an indication that it may be brought back. We don't know whether it is really the intention of the government to go back to the original version, or it is only a sort of a media hype. But even if they go back, there is no issue. But as of now, because the current PDP bill is expected to cover anonymized personal data to some extent, and the notification of the data breach of non-personal data, we were considering that the compliance of ITA 2000 needs to be merged with the compliance of DPA 2021 or 22, whatever name is given to that. In fact, keeping this in mind, our own framework, that is the Personal Data Protection Standard of India, PDPSI, we changed it into Data Protection Compliance Standard of India, and we also added the requirements of this notification of data breach into the framework, and also to the extent necessary, whatever was required to make this anonymized personal data also covered under our policies in the framework. Those two changes we actually made into the PDPSI framework. But now if the government changes it once again, probably they become infructuous. But anyway, this is how every day some developments are happening in the ITA 2000 area, and that gets that impacts the DPA 2021, and whoever is working on the personal data protection domain need to continuously take note of what is happening in the Information Technology Act. And some of that is highlighted because of the 4 recent developments which we can discuss today. First is the latest, which is the 16th June notification, where the Ministry of Information Technology declared ICICI Bank CBS system as protected system under Section 70. A gazette notification to that effect was issued, and it came to the public. Simultaneously, media reported that HDFC Bank system also has been declared a protected system. NPCI system also has been declared as a protected system. But so far, I have not been able to get hold of the gazette notifications regarding HDFC Bank and the NPCI. Somehow these gazette notifications are not appearing in the ministry website. It is not, at least I was not able to locate it in the egazette.nic.in also. I don't know why only the ICICI Bank thing came out into the open, whereas rest of it has not come out into the open. Okay, we will discuss that in a little more detail. Then, and also the impact of this government declaring a private sector system as protected has a long-term implication. Then there was also a minor amendment to the Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code, which was first released in February 25, 2021. Immediately thereafter, a lot of hue and cry was raised, and then it landed up in many courts. At least 3 high courts actually commented on parts of this particular guideline, and actually I think it scrapped portions of the guideline as was made applicable to the digital media. Then it went to the Supreme Court. It is pending with the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, the ministry brought out a small amendment on 6th June 2022. In fact, it was on this that the ministry recently had a stakeholders meeting also. So they are trying to push these guidelines. So we will briefly discuss that. Then in between, the TRA gave a report, but I don't know whether it will become effective. But they said that they are likely to mandate display of caller ID by the telecom operators by using the KYC data which is already with them. In a way, if this happens, the possibility of what we call as voice phishing will be substantially reduced. So it is a good move. At the same time, from the business point of view, businesses like Truecaller will definitely get affected. And as of today, if you look at a Truecaller kind of business, it is a privacy nightmare, because very difficult to establish a lawful basis for Truecaller to capture the information about the contact details of its user and make it public to various other people. But somehow Truecaller has been working on that, and that would have come in for some kind of let us say review, judicial review, if the Data Protection Act had come into being. Now, if this KYC based system recommended by TRA comes in, probably the privacy issues will get absorbed, because this becomes a government order, and it is the telecom operator who is providing the identity of the caller. And in fact, this also raises a question of why not similar caller ID be displayed in the email system also, so that the possibility of phishing through emails is also reduced. Today, as we all know, in the email, we can set any name as the display name, and that is what is normally the point of contention whenever phishing happens. Now, if in the voice messages, if the government brings a law or a practice whereby the caller ID is displayed to the recipient, tomorrow we can also demand that Gmail or any other service provider who works within the Indian legal system should also display the real identity of the person sending the email, so that the phishing possibilities are substantially reduced. We'll see whether it will happen or not, because I don't know whether this will be carried through to its conclusion. Then we will also briefly go back to the certain security guidelines, because this has become a bone of contention in the information security area. And in fact, this actually became effective 60 days from 28th April 2022. And recently, the government actually gave an extension to the MSMEs up to, I think, September or so. But for others, it means that this has become effective today. So we will try to look at it. Now, coming back to this little bit details of this section 70 Gazette notification. The notification regarding the ICICI Bank is reproduced here. What we need to understand here is that this notification identifies the core banking solution, the RTGS system, NEFT system, and structured financial messaging server. These four items, as Adepu was trying to point out, as the systems which will be called as the protected system. Now, does the bank has more systems? Probably yes, but it is only these four systems which will be coming under the particular protected system category. Now, Adepu points out that out of these, 3 are owned by the bank and 1 by RBI. Adepu, why don't you clarify which is the one which is owned by RBI?
Sir, out of the 4 IT systems,
yeah,
EBS is bank's own one, ICICI Bank, which is developed by Infosys. Whereas RTGS, NEFT, EFT are owned by RBI.
Okay.
RBI establishes the entire systems and banks are using as a secondary users.
Okay. What about this messaging server?
Yeah, that is RBI, sir.
RBI. Now, actually, I did discuss this with the ministry people that instead of trying to declare a private bank system as the protected system, they could have very well protected the RBI controlled systems as protected systems, and it would have also perhaps served the requirement. But anyway, I think they had, by that time, they had already issued this circular, and you know that once a notification is issued, nobody wants to take it back. So this remains as it is. But even in the RTGS, there is a system which is controlled at the end of the RBI, but there must be a system which is also controlled by the bank. Maybe I think Rakesh Goyal can add something to this. Can you split the RTGS system into one part which is controlled by the bank and one part controlled by the RBI? Rakesh?
RBI controls the core of that, and banks is a user. It's just like CBS is the bank's property, and as a user, let's say you are using internet banking, so you are using it. The same way, the NEFT and RTGS are used by various banks who are the members of for that specific system which is developed by IDRBT, and now it is operated by RBI. RBI is basically this RTGS and NEFT are nothing but the exchange. So the money goes from the bank to that exchange. It is going to the other bank, which IFSC code is there, and from there it goes to their CDS. As far as NEFT and RTGS is concerned, the banks are simply users and they are allowed to link that thing with their CDS, so that directly from the RTGS and NEFT, money will go to their CDS when it is incoming remittance.
Yeah, so there is a user end system, including the database of banks' own customers, which are linked to this RTGS system of RBI, which more or less is like a switch, perhaps operated by IDRBT. So if I think what this notification says is, it is not talking about IDRBT or RBI side of this transaction. It is only talking of the bank's side of the transaction. This is the reason why I wanted to see the HDFC bank system notification as well as NPCI notification to understand whether there was any difference. But since those Gazette notifications were not available, we are only looking at this. Now they have made a mention that these systems of the ICICI Bank. So the question remains that only one part of this system, like the client end kind of an activity, instead of the switch end kind of activity, I think is declared as the protected system, because it is ICICI Bank which connects to this central RTGS system. Maybe more clarification would have been necessary, but right now we don't have that, unless any of you have had the opportunity to directly talk to ICICI Bank. Okay. Now, and in my opinion, this notification is grossly inadequate in terms of what Section 70 envisages, because it does not describe the things properly. Now, as we are now discussing, we do not know whether we are talking of the entire RTGS system and or only the ICICI Bank part of the RTGS system, because that is the only thing on which ICICI Bank has got a control. So that kind of clarification should have been inbuilt into this particular Gazette notification, because declaring a system as a protected system, I will show you the actual section in the next slide, and then going into the details of who can operate and other things is a much more, say, complicated affair. Now, in this Gazette notification, they have given this who can operate the systems just by saying any designated employee authorized by ICICI Bank. It doesn't even say designated employee of the bank. Any designated employee of a perhaps service provider also may be authorized by ICICI Bank. Any authorized team members of contractual managed service provider or third party vendor who have been authorized by ICICI Bank for need-based access. Any consultant, regulator, government official, auditor, stakeholder authorized by ICICI Bank. So it's a very, very broad description that anybody can access a protected system. This is completely contrary to the concept of protected system as was envisaged in the Act. We will come back to this for discussion, but let us look at what Section 70 says in the Act itself. There was one version of Section 70 in the ITA 2000 version, and then 2008 there was a change. What you are seeing here is the version which came after Information Technology Amendment Act was passed. It says that the appropriate government, by notification of the official gazette, declare any computer resource which is directly or indirectly affects the facility of critical information infrastructure to be a protected system. So it is a condition precedent that only systems which can be called critical information infrastructure can be called a protected system. Because earlier to this, at least there was one notification from Tamil Nadu government which had declared all computers of Tamil Nadu government are protected systems, which meant that even employee's computer used for some say receptionist or something also became protected system. So to prevent that kind of misapplication of Section 70. This was amended in 2008, and it was mentioned that only if a system can fall into the definition of critical information infrastructure, that can be declared as a protected system, not otherwise. And the critical information infrastructure was defined as a resource, the incapacitation or destruction of which shall have debilitating impact on national security, economy, public health, or safety. Since this is a condition precedent, any notification, according to me, should give an explanation of why they have chosen a particular system to be declared as a protected system, how it is considered as a critical information infrastructure, why debilitation of that system affects national security, economy, public health, etc. Now, in the case of ICICI Bank or even HDFC Bank, by market capitalization, they are large banks. But if you look at the criticality of operations, State Bank of India holds most of the government assets. In fact, all treasuries of government, central and state, and even accounts of defense, etc. I suppose most of them originally were only with either RBI or with State Bank of India. Wherever commercial bank was required, it was only with State Bank of India. In recent days, some state governments have tried to use ICICI Bank or Axis Bank and others for some of their e-governance activities. But otherwise, a large number of critical financial assets of the government lies with State Bank of India, which is not in the list of banks which have been declared as protected system here. Only ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank are there. They may have a large market capitalization, but that is private shareholders' interest and not necessarily that of the critical infrastructure where national security, national economy, etc. is affected. Unless we define that if there are 10,000 accounts of ICICI Bank which are hacked or something like that, then the banking system gets generally affected, and it does affect the national economy. In fact, at one point of time, I had personally met the officials of ICICI Bank, and at that time they had said there are more than 40,000 complaints of phishing in their bank at that point of time. Now it could be even more. So if you say that there was a very large number of, you can say, cybercrime attacks on ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank, and therefore there is a possibility of national economic crisis being caused by some way it is, if it is attacked, maybe consequent to this any new developments which we do not know. There could have been an attack detected from China or something like that. They should have actually made a case for declaring ICICI Bank or HDFC Bank as a critical system. In fact, NPCI is more eligible for being called as a critical information infrastructure because it operates the UPI system, and there is a lot more a common man's interest involved in the NPCI, because customer does not directly enter into a contract with NPCI. It becomes part of the infrastructure, and if something goes wrong there, the public will get affected. So out of the three, I feel that NPCI is more eligible to be called as a critical information infrastructure, whereas both ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank are large private sector banks. Of course, if there is a major attack on these banks, everybody would get affected, but whether that is sufficient to call it as a critical information infrastructure is slightly, debatable. Now, if that condition is satisfied, the Section 70 says appropriate government by order in writing, authorize the persons who are authorized to access protected systems. And once this authorization is given, any person who secures access or attempts to secure access in contravention of the provisions of this section shall be punished with imprisonment, which may go up to 10 years. There is even the attempt will land up in a possible imprisonment of 10 years. And this can be invoked when a person actually secures the access or attempts to secure the access in a manner which is not in accordance with what the Gazette notification specifies. So it is necessary for the notification to be as detailed as necessary. Otherwise, there could be a lot of accidental, you can say, attempts to access the system by a method which is outside the approved method, and this 10 years imprisonment could be hoisted on any of the employees of the organization who come under this notification, or the authorized team members. All these people, now they all have a specific system of access which should have been declared as a part of this notification, which has not been done now. But let us say by a supplementary notification it happens. Then even by a mistake, if somebody tries to access the system in any other manner, for example, a particular access has to be done only from the bank's network, but an official tries to access it from his home, that is sufficient to make him liable for 10 years of imprisonment. This is the criticality of this, and the government taking this notification lightly, I think, is something which worries me. And the central government shall prescribe the information security practices and procedures for such protected system. So this is again part of section 70. So while declaring the system as protected system, central government should prescribe the information security practices and procedures. So central government becomes the designated CISO of the organization. They have to prescribe, and that should be part of this notification. None of this has happened today, and therefore I consider that this notification was not well thought out. Now, sometime back in the year 2018, 22nd May 2018, the government has actually come up with rules regarding protected systems. There is this IT security systems, and that becomes automatically applicable to the current notification. And this information, one of the things which this requires is that there should be an information security steering committee, and consists of the CISO, then a representative of the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, which is nothing but a CERT-in, and any other expert to be nominated by the organization, which means that the Apex Security Committee of ICICI Bank should now have a representative from CERT-in and probably another expert, whichever is done. So which means that the current committee will have to be reconstituted with the particular restructured management. And then this information security steering committee will be the apex body, and it has to approve all information security policies. See, right now, ICICI Bank may be compliant with ISO 27001. They might have put PCI DSS or whatever systems in place. Now, all that will have to be reviewed now by the CERT-in and approved. Okay, so this becomes a necessary condition before this whole system becomes effective, which means that I am actually reminded of a situation where in the earlier days of banking, whenever a bank became sick, we used to have a system where the bank, I'm talking of a client of a bank becoming sick, an industry becoming sick. The bankers used to appoint an official of the bank as a director in that particular company, so that he will be able to supervise the operations of the particular company. In fact, in many cases, in large organizations, this representative of the bank, which may be State Bank of India or any other consortium leader, he would even sit inside the company's head office, and he will be signing all major checks and decisions. So that was the kind of control which was established by the lending bank on a default customer. This was, of course, before all this current tribunal system and recovery system came. At that time, recovery otherwise would have been difficult. But the fact was that there was a day-to-day monitoring of the organization from financial terms. Now, what is happening here in this section 70 also is something similar, that the CERTIN is going to be monitoring the security system of the subject system, which is in this case ICICI Bank, on almost a day-to-day basis, and that is what is explained in the May 2018 circular. And a mechanism shall be established to share the results of all information security audits with the information security steering committee, which has got the certain person in place. Then this system has to be revalidated once in 2 years. So these are some of the functions of the steering committee as available in the particular 2018 circular. Going further in terms of reporting, it said that the CISO will be reporting various things like details of the infrastructure, including dependencies, which means that your architecture, IT architecture will have to be shared with the certain details of the committee, information security, ISMS system, network architecture, authorized persons having access, inventory of hardware and software related to protected system. When you say related to protected system, it includes RTGS and NEFT. Every system which can have access to RTGS and NEFT becomes a related system. If it belongs to the bank at least, which means that all the branches of the bank and other things, they become automatically part of this inventory. Now, details of vulnerability, threat or risk analysis, which has been done, cyber crisis management plan, and information security audit reports. So, and IT security service level agreements. So all these things need to be brought to the attention of the CERTIN representative. We know that CERTIN itself has got limited capabilities in terms of manpower. Now, if the representative of CERTIN has to double up as a co-CISO of ICICI Bank, it requires quite a lot of effort, and perhaps they will have to recruit a person exclusively for each such accounts. Now, for these 3 accounts, CERTIN may have to recruit 3 different persons of the capability of the level of CISOs of these things, and then make them the people who will be reporting the details with the Director General of CERTIN and so on. Now, in between, Mr. Rakesh said something apart from NPCI, NSE, BSE, etc. are real candidates, agreed. But today it is not there. But the question, and for PNB, certainly, because PNB is one of the large banks and we have got plenty of cyber crimes happening, and railways, airlines, UIDA, of course, is a separate statute itself. Now, the question is, if you have done that to SBI, to these 2 banks and NPCI, what is the reason why it should not be done for PNB, should not be done for SBI or something like that? I think this itself is a matter which could be questioned in a court of law as some kind of discriminatory treatment, because the government has failed to give a proper logic. If they had explained this logic of why we have chosen only these 2 or 3 institutions and made it part of this notification, perhaps they would have been in a firmer ground. Now, without giving proper explanations, they have jumped into this notification, and therefore the question will be asked, why not others which are more critical in terms of national security, national economic situation, national health kind of a thing? Now we have got this Arogya that is the national NIHM or something like that, they call, no, the National Health Management System, that is perhaps as critical as it is. For example, AIMS. Okay. Now every VIP goes and gets his treatment there, and therefore that system becomes more critical than anything else. So the question of why they have not been included needs to be answered by the government. Now, while that is something to say that the government should have done it better, now the impact of this notification on a private sector entity like ICICI Bank, if you look at it, it is obvious that it severely restricts the freedom of operation of the organization. It, of course, enhances their security, but you know that if there is a restriction, and if the CISO of the bank has to refer everything to certain person and certain person is not available or something like that, it severely curtails the operational freedom of the organization. And the persons who are authorized, if they are not properly identified and notified, and whenever changes are there, like a person going on leave or a new person taking over a particular thing, these are problems in access management on a day-to-day basis. Now, the problems arising out of that now gets multiple times more risky, because if a new employee comes and sits in the desk and for some reason the earlier person has shared his password with this new employee, then suddenly we are looking at a 10-year imprisonment for that person. This is not a normal password sharing between two employees of an organization, which is a disciplinary issue or something like that. Now we suddenly jump into the national security scenario and the Section 70 application, and both the people will be liable for 10 years imprisonment. This kind of a high level impact for any violation. We know that a lot of such violations keep happening in any organization. Now they become very, very problematic for a commercial organization like this. That's why it exposes negligent access to 10 years imprisonment. Remember, it is not only access, it is an attempt to access. Then the question is whether this is good for bank or bad for bank in terms of reputation. I don't know. This only the market will have to make an assessment. Now, people who are aware of some of these things may take a stand that government thought of declaring this as a protected system because they were unhappy with the security system of the bank. That way, it can have a negative connotation for the reputation. But at the same time, somebody may say that the bank was considered so valuable to the country that it was declared as a protected system. So there could be two opinions, but both need to be taken note of. And my worry is that if this has been done for ICICI Bank today, will this become a trend? Can government start micromanaging information security of more banks? Okay, tomorrow maybe SBI, maybe PNB, maybe something else, or maybe other services. Now, if government starts doing this, it is like nationalization of the information security of the banks. Okay, I may be taking an extreme view, but I'm trying to say that this could be the possibility. I have been using this kind of a risk matrix for ITA 2000 related risks, where I had, of course, taken the data privacy risk, data retention risk, and info demand risk, where we had covered 69, 69A, 69B, and 70B. Now it appears that Section 70 itself poses a risk. That is, if I am an organization, I am doing something very critical service, okay, am I at the risk of being declared as a critical infrastructure, and tomorrow the certain will start breathing down my neck? Is something which becomes a kind of risk which I have to perhaps look into. So this is my observations. We can now go into a discussion of this before we go into other aspects briefly. Okay. Yeah. Anybody who have got a view on what we discussed? This could tomorrow become also a pointer in the data protection area, the data protection authority also may sometimes say, after all, if the current system of personal and non-personal data remain in DPA, the certain director also becomes part of the data protection regime. And tomorrow they may even try to use the same analogy for a personal data managing, say, business, and say that the DPA will get more than usual monitoring powers, because anyway the law provides for supervisory and monitoring powers for DPA. So that is something which comes to my mind. Yeah. Any questions?
I believe that you are slightly on the extreme side, but yes, it is good for the organization if any government organization, whether NP, ISCC or certain or whatever, whosoever designate, is sitting on that ISSC, because if something goes wrong, even they are also equally responsible. The bank, whether it is ICICI or somebody else, or which is a protected system, can always say, if something has gone wrong, you are also part of it. Why I should be blamed for that? And if they are coming for the good, they say, okay, this, as you said, that password is shared. Why the password should be shared at all? If it is shared, then yes, 10 years or whatever it is, that sword on the head of the person should be there. Yes, if you share the password, you are booked for 10 years. So that deterrent, that punitive action, that type of fear has to be there. So if they are there, they are monitoring it, then they are also responsible for the security. They are also responsible for the part of implementation of the security. It is good. They cannot interfere into day-to-day management, because it's part of ISSC. Ultimately, it is CISO who is responsible, and CISO has to report to the board. CISO has to report to the CEO, whatever it is. He cannot report to CIO or anyone else, because he is fully responsible for all those 10 points which were there in your slide. But at the same time, it is good if some oversight board, let's consider this is an oversight board, is there, and they are also validating what you are doing is right. If something happens, they say that you also validate it. So
no, I agree that
only we are not responsible, you are also responsible.
I fully agree.
And if certain could say a person who is incompetent or less qualified, it is their funeral, not the bank's funeral.
Okay.
Good evening, Naavi.
Others, yeah.
Naavi, could you able to hear me? Murugan this side.
Yeah, tell me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. See, as you said, KYC, what TRI is doing, you wanted for the email side also. So already within organization, just like that, they don't create a email ID and everything, unless it's a full-time employee getting all the KYC detail, only they are creating the email ID. Similarly, you want a Gmail also should do similar kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's the logical extension, no? Because phishing happens because Gmail is allowing for anonymous or pseudonymous emails to be sent. Now, from the cybercrime prevention angle, is it good if there is like verifiability, which we are talking of in Twitter and other things now? No, DPA is now asking all social media intermediaries to give an option to the user to verify themselves, and then insist that verification aspect should be put in front of my message or something. Now the same thing can be extended to Google and said that if I want my Gmail account to be identified, they should provide for that verification, and once verified, they should be able to say this is a verified email. So this,
yeah, see, presently, Naavi, if you see Gmail, while creating the email ID and everything, they are taking the mobile names, mobile number, taking OTP, and then only going at creation. Even if you try to open your Gmail in some other devices and everything, also authentication asked in the mobile, registered mobile number. Is the mobile number alone is not a kind of a KYC Gmail is not doing?
No, correct. But suppose you change your display name from Murugan to say Harish and then send it to me, Gmail doesn't bother. So yeah, when I receive
they should have a control. They should have a control on the display name parameter actually.
Yeah. So that is,
it should not be freely given to change actually.
Correct. That is what is this KYC, I mean, TRA system will do also. Okay.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing that the spam and phishing mail will be reduced to the as far as GL mail is concerned. And
Yeah.
I know that who has sent me anonymous mails cannot be sent. Whether okay, I may not know the IP address but Gmail is not going. But at least the person who has registered with that particular email ID will be shown. This is good for the recipient.
Yeah, I think Gmail should have a control on the display name
Display.
parameter actually.
Yeah.
I think that should be a good suggestion. Should go from FDPA. Something Gmail to consider will be the better than instead of asking for KYC. Then Gmail will come back. Will they allow us to other database to access and then validate KYC and everything? Something they may try to bring it up.
Yeah, and it can be voluntary as it has been done in other cases.
Correct.
And it is also only for Indian this thing. In DPA it says only for Indian subscribers. It's voluntarily that option is given. Same thing, if it is extended, it will be beneficial.
Or if the email ID where the Gmail is created is used for any business or legal related transaction. See, I may have a 5 Gmail ID.
Okay, you can maintain an unverified account also. As a recipient, when I receive the mail from an unverified account, I know I have to degrade it. It's trustworthiness to some extent. That's all.
In the verified email ID where the display name cannot be changed, it's like some controls can be implemented.
Yeah, I will give more trust.
Exactly.
That particular email. Yeah.
Thank you. I think this should go as a suggestion from FDPA to Gmail and the government. Thank you.
So Naavi, this is Ramesh here. I don't know if you remember sometime back, the security share actually tried to implement some similar technology. So the edge computing wise, they wanted to identify the email and trusted emails only will come. And they also kind of came back with kind of a folders. Only those trusted mails will come into that folder. Rest of things will get deleted or go into the junk. Maybe I'll try next session if they can join for a session. I'll just check with Bhaskar if they can want to do the session for us.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Limaye joined a little late. I don't know whether he was able to listen to what all I was telling.
Naavi sir.
Yeah.
Sir, right now I am traveling, so I am not able to ask anything.
Okay. Yeah, Depo.
RTGS, NEFT, SFMS, these are the digital payment systems introduced by Reserve Bank of India as a owner.
Yeah.
All other banks are their participants only. So actually the notification has to cover the payment system. Ideally, they could have declared the RBI system as a secure one, protected one. That could have covered all the banking environment, entire ecosystem. That is one point. Second point is RBI has a procedure to do the IT security audit of all the banks once in 2 years. When I was in a bank, there was a team of 22 auditors came for a 2 months time in ICICI Bank.
Yeah.
That was certain of audits happens. But despite the RBI audits, now only one ICICI Bank only been given this particular notification is a mystery for people like me who are in the banking system. These systems are just like our old clearinghouse, sir. All banks used to participate in old clearinghouse where we go with check and exchange it. The same way, the money transfers now happening through digital, where RBI is the central party, not the one bank. So this is I think there is a big mystery behind this. We have to, time only will come to know.
Good. Anyway, it's an interesting development, particularly for those of you who work as auditors of the bankers. Now, this is a new angle which you have to take into account. Suppose you are auditing ICICI Bank or let us say HDFC Bank, then probably you will have a little more responsibility than what you were doing earlier. Whether that certain will say that protected systems can be audited by only a few other specially accredited auditors, not all certain auditors. This they have to think, because having declared something as a protected system, whether it can be considered as on par with all other systems in terms of who can audit and other things. These are things which will have to be thought of. Since I think the ministry has not thought deeply into it, and they have come up with this thing for whatever urgent need was there. It is necessary for professionals to actually raise these questions so that they will perhaps give the clarifications as may be required.
No, sir, one surprising thing is ICICI Bank has not come out with any notification or any communication to public.
And another thing, now this ICICI Bank or HDFC Bank, this is a stock price sensitive information according to me. Okay, that the government has declared this ICICI Bank or HDFC Bank as protected system. But so far, they don't seem to have given any notice to the stock exchange, and it doesn't even come as the front page disclosure in these banks, ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, because they should have put up there immediately. This disclosure is still absent. These are some of the things which I have pointed out to the ministry. I don't know whether they will correct those things. Okay.
There is no material change because this is nothing but security, more security. So they need not to give a notice to the stock exchange that okay, this will affect their share price or their. It is not a requirement. It's not a financial.
I told you there could be a perception.
It's a perception, and they are playing a marketing game.
The perception, the perception can be on the other side also. I can always say that there was perhaps a big attack on ICICI Bank, which is being investigated, and that's why government had to rush in and declare it.
See, government itself doesn't declare. The organization has to work for that. They have to put an application, and after that, there's a big process. So it's not that government will say that you are. It has to be initiated by the end user.
ITA 2000 does not envisage that anybody can apply to be to the status of.
It may not be in the act, but that is the procedure that is followed by
ICC. If that procedure is being followed, it is a wrong procedure because this has to be a critical infrastructure. And the government has to make the first move, according to me. Anyway, that can
be debated. That can be debated.
That is for further debate.
As far as reality is concerned, that is the process right now. Because I am involved with. I am not partly involved with my two customers who are doing this thing, and it's a really loop.
But I'm trying to highlight that there could be pain on the neck if that declaration is made also. So that's what I'm just trying to highlight. It is open to the organizations to manage that. Okay, I think let us stop that discussion there and quickly go through the other things within the remaining time. This intermediary guidelines, we know that this February 25 guidelines came in. It was, I think, 6 months time was given, 180 days. Some time was given. And then this court cases and other things came. What they have now done is this amendment of 6th of June. They only address the grievance mechanism. See, earlier, this intermediary guidelines had two parts. One part was applicable to normal intermediaries. Second part was applicable to the digital media, so significant social media intermediaries. And that was what was something which created a problem. In the first part, that is all intermediaries, the guidelines only said that you should give a privacy policy, you should tell the user that he should not do this, he should not do this kind of a thing, a list of disclosures or instructions to be given in the terms of use. And end of it, it said that there should be a grievance redressal mechanism there. In the case of the digital media, they introduced an ethical code which said that the digital media platform has to identify and tag every digital media item as suitable for a certain age or something like that. Now, Adepo was talking of Janaganamana or something like that. If Netflix is putting there, they have to also say that this is for 18 plus or whatever is that. And that content details will have to be given. These are some of the things which were mentioned in the digital media code. And as far as the grievance redressal mechanism was concerned, for the digital media, they suggested that there could be a self-regulatory system, one at the level of the organization and second at the level of the industry. But because the whole system got bogged down in litigation, that has not yet been implemented. So now the government came up with something called a Grievance Appellate Committee. What they said was that there is a grievance redressal mechanism in every company, which is managed by the company itself. Okay, your help center and augmented help center, which takes care of ombudsman or something like that. Now, if at the end of this resolution effort, if the user and the organization is not able to reach a conclusion, it could be regarding removal of content or defamatory posting and something like that. then there was no other mechanism for further appeals. So what they now said is that now all those complaints are coming to the department, mighty department, somebody who is in charge of cyber law or something like that. Now they have tried to put it into an organized method by which the grievance appellate committee will be formed. Additionally, they made some small changes in the guidelines, which was something like to say that intermediary shall cause the user of the computer resource not to host the content. What I have called as illegal content is it should not be obscene, it should not infringe in copyright, etc. That list was there. Now, earlier it said that it should not be hosted. So you have to only give in your privacy policy that user shall not host something like that. Now they say intermediary shall cause the user not to host. So some proactive measures will have to be taken to identify if the content infringes any of those conditions, and then perhaps take some effort to proactively flag that content. So that is one change. Then similarly, intermediary shall ensure accessibility to the service. Basically, the ministry clarified that what they meant here was something like this net neutrality concept, that the service should be made available without any discrimination. And then they added one more thing called intermediary shall respect the rights of Indian citizens under the constitution. This is to meet the some issues which were being created by Twitter and others who were telling that we abide by the US law, so we don't go by your law or something like that. So they added these one or two small points, but basically they said there is a grievance redressal appellate committee. Now the discussions in the last meeting with Rajiv Chandrasekhar was on how this will be constituted and so on. It has not been concluded properly, but they may come up with taking the public comments into consideration. They may come up with the next version. But what they have failed to recognize is Information Technology Act has its own adjudication system and appellate tribunal system going up to the High Court and Supreme Court. This is a grievance redressal mechanism under law, which is embedded in the Act. And any other grievance redressal mechanism which is introduced cannot override this provision without the amendment to the Act. If there is an adjudicator will remain the grievance redressal person under the statute after all negotiations between the user and the intermediary reaches a no agreement kind of a situation. So this, even if you call something as a grievance appellate committee, the decision of the grievance appellate committee will be reviewed back by the adjudicator, and it will go to the normal TDSAT, which is currently the appellate tribunal, and it will go to the High Court. That point, I think the ministry has not fully recognized. I hope in the next version of this amended this thing, they will take that into account. Now, we discussed this TRA guidelines, so I'll just skip that. Now, as far as the certain guidelines is concerned, in fact, those of you who are into information security will have to say how difficult or impossible is it to follow this certain guidelines, because from the IS circles, the noise which is coming out is that it is almost impossible to do all these things. I am not sure. I am not an expert information security implementing person. But what these guidelines have said is a synchronization of network clocks, so that if any information is taken as evidence in a cyber crime, there will be no dispute about the timing. Then transactions stored, and this is something they said, transactions should be stored in such a manner that the whole transaction can be reconstructed. So it is not just keeping the log. The log will have to be fed into another system to recreate the whole system. In fact, I had come across one such device by a Bangalore manufacturer sometime back. It was actually 8-10 years back. I don't know whether he still exists or not, but he had created a black box kind of a system, which was a plug-in to the network, and he was capturing all data packets, and then it was possible for that to replay the whole transaction. I think that is the kind of thing which may become essential now. Then log record maintenance for 180 days for all kinds of devices. Then KYC in case of service providers, information should be kept for 5 years. Virtual VPN service providers who are not happy with this are now actually exiting the country. I think that cannot be helped because the systems cannot be supportive of anonymized transactions which will support the crimes. Then reporting of incidents within 6 hours is also very much opposed, but what is required is initial information which can be supplemented with additional things, and a list of incidents were given. Point of contact has to be established and the details should be given to CERT-In. And these are some of the major guidelines which are introduced. I personally feel that it can be done, but anyway, after I close this, comments can be given on that. Then types of security incidents, they have given a list of about 20 different kind of things as indicative kind of things, which is applicable to all service providers, intermediaries, data centers, body corporates, and government organizations. It includes malicious code attacks. It includes compromise of critical systems, unauthorized access, and all these things, identity theft, spoofing, and so the entire 20 points have been mentioned as different instances of cyber security incidents which needs to be reported within the 6 hours, probably as an initial report and then substantiated with more information. Now, subsequently, CERT-In has also issued a very detailed FAQ document. Links to this will be available from Naavi.org if you are interested. It is should be available on the MIT website also. Now, some of the things which they have clarified in this, one is when there are multiple parties who are involved in the service. Somebody has raised a question, is it enough if one person submits the notification of data breach? What they have suggested is that every person who is handling that system and who makes an observation should separately send the notification. Okay, that is one of the clarifications they have issued. Then somebody has asked, do I need to report incidents even if I have contractual obligation not to disclose the details with the customer, which is what we normally come across with international transactions. But they have clearly said that adherence to Indian Act is essential. So it cannot be under the excuse of a contract. You cannot stop giving whatever information is given. As far as the consequences of non-compliance is concerned, now you know that CERT-In can only say that because you have not been compliant, you will not get protection under section 79. In fact, today I saw that Twitter has been given one more special extension, I think, for another month or so for adhering to some of these guidelines. Government is trying to accommodate them to the extent possible. Other than that, CERT-In can only wait and watch and bring in the consequences through some other crime which is recognized. Of course, I have been saying that CERT-In can always report the matter to the adjudicator who can put in civil penalties. But otherwise, CERT-In does not normally deal with any application of civil penalties. So consequences are actually marginal. Okay. Then as far as the foreign companies are concerned, and somebody has asked a question whether it applies only to Indian companies. They have clarified no. You can go by the section 75 jurisdiction. Based on that, whichever is company for which Information Technology Act is applicable, to all of them, the certain guidelines will be applicable. This means that any one computer system, if it is located within the geographical boundaries of India, if that belongs to that company, then this act will be applicable. If the act is applicable, then automatically this notification also will be applicable. Then as far as the log records are concerned, somebody has asked whether it should be stored only in India. They have not insisted that. They have only said that as long as you can produce the logs, we are okay. So there is no data localization here. So these are some of the things which are there in the CERT-In. And now for a few minutes, if you have got any questions and discussions, we can do that and then close the session. Okay.
these guidelines are good and they are implementable easily. People don't want to do it because they don't want to do it. Otherwise, and they are, see, these guidelines have come because something has happened in the past. To overcome that type of incident, to cover those evidences, these guidelines are come. They are learning from the experience. So, and they are not bad. They are saying that you have to follow Indian law, you have to follow Indian constitution, you have to take care of the Indian subjects, Indian citizens' interest. So, what is wrong in that? And 6 hours is not a bad thing. 6 hours can be recruited. 6 hours.
In fact, I want to have the views of other CISOs, say about Rakesh and people like us. We are kind of auditors. Okay, that's different. Now, as the operating people, if some of you would like to react, for example, Anup or somebody like that, I would like to hear what is their view on. Now, for some of them should have already implemented this by 26th of June. Have you been able to do it, Harish and others?
Sir, may I add?
Yeah, please.
This is Chetan speaking.
Yeah, tell me, Chetan. Yeah.
Yeah, sir. First question is, what will be the impact of the organization if we go on reporting such? It includes also phishing. So today, almost all organizations have seen this type of attack. So what will be the reputation of the organization if we go on reporting such incidents?
No, say you have to make a distinction in your policy for incident and breaches. There is, of course, the certain guideline also tries to make a distinction. So obviously, certain things will stop at being an incident. That is a suspected phishing or a phishing attempt, which just is an attack, which does not fructify. But if a breach actually happens, then I think irrespective of the reputation damage, CERT-In would like to know. It doesn't mean that CERT-In is going to publish it everywhere that this was there or something like that. CERT-In would like to know the security, you can say the system in India. And it is not their intention to damage your reputation by saying, giving a list of companies that there are 1,000 say attacks on XYZ company or something like that. They may not do that, but they would like to have information, and you can distinguish that information between incidents and breaches. And what is more important is the breach, where the compromise has actually happened. And other suspected events, you may statistically collect that. It is like your IDS system. But I don't think CERT-In will jump in and say, try to damage your reputation. But otherwise, being a Apex cyber security organization in India, like this CERT-In, I think it is difficult to hide some of the say incidents because of the fear of reputation. It's not a question of giving it to the public or to your competitor. It's only going to the government. It's like
CERT-In, as per the app, CERT-In is the app, this Apex or nodal for the cyber security. So they have to collect what has happened and they have to dispense the learning from that to others without giving the name. Okay, this has happened, and you see the CERT-In has is coming out advisories on the regular basis. How those advisories, either they are coming from the US or Europe, or they are generating inside India. So they want to do that type of thing. They want to do R&D. They want to educate others that, okay, this is happening and be aware of this. That is one thing. Then they want to do statistical analysis also. So they are being a nodal agency for this cyber security. As per the Act itself, 2008, they were made a nodal agency. So it is their job to do it. And if people don't cooperate, then they have to put it under.
Yes. Subraido, you have got any views?
Sir, one more question, sir. Chetan.
Yeah, please.
So, I agree with you that we should distinguish between an incident and a breach. But what happens normally is, let's say we go for ISO 27001 certification. It talks about 3 things: events, incidents, and weaknesses. So there is no specific category called breaches. That is number 1. So we are adding more.
No. Say ISO 27001 is not the be all and end all of security. I have always held it like that. So if they have not decided about breach, because that's a question of ISMS system. The objective of ISO 27001 is different. So whereas here the objective is different, even if ISO does not recognize something called breach, if that is required here, you may have to do it according to me.
No,
In 27,001 also, it is considered as an incident. So incident has to be defined as per your procedure, whatever you are defined.
no, that is fine. But where is breach? There is no such requirement under incident management. See, we are only adding terms. Which is only,
how you look into
let me finish. So what is happening on ground, because I am talking from a CISO perspective. So what is happening on ground is we are only creating confusion among the employees. How will the employee know what is what? We are just adding terms to it. That is the question.
No, I agree that compliance requires some efforts. Perhaps it is required to be done. You look at that circular and look at cyber incident and design this FAQ. I told you, that entire booklet. It is a fairly detailed document. You please go through that, and maybe all your employees should also be aware. See, they should know the information security policy of the organization. No, so the organization's policy itself contains so many definitions and other things, and ISO might have listed some 100 terms, and we are going to add a few more terms. It has to be part of the compliance. What do you say, Ramesh or Rakesh?
Sir, Subbaraju here. So when we, in due course of our audits, when we saw earlier on the certain guidelines, although the guidelines were there, the consequences of not reporting to certain were not very clear. Okay, so many MNCs, in fact, they did not care for certain guidelines at all. Their internal corporate policies forbade them from reporting any breaches to any public agency anywhere. The internal procedure says that they first have to contact corporate headquarters, and corporate headquarters will decide what to do. Okay, so I don't know how much of the new guidelines, how they'll be received by the MNCs and how much they'll be implemented. We have to wait and watch.
People will still take a chance, but it is at their own peril. Okay, if something goes wrong, then people will come back and say, when did you come to know of this incident? What did you do? Did you report it or not? That becomes a compounded offense for which greater penalties may become applicable.
Yeah, I think, but I saw some news that even in the US, they are trying to pass a law which makes it mandatory to report data breaches. So they might approach it more from a compliance angle that, if it's a compliance activity, there's a regulatory authority in the country which we need to report to. So let's do it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But it's an evolving space. Let's see how it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Satya, you have got anything to say?
This is Harish. Sir,
tell me, Harish.
as the consequence of not reporting the incident, it is not high. I have not seen many organizations have taken this as a serious consideration.
Now, say section 70B has given the powers of starting a prosecution for an imprisonment of up to 1 year. That is the power available to certain, but they cannot issue an administrative order for that. They will have to initiate an action through a proper complaint, and a court will take a decision whether 1 year imprisonment has to be given or not. So there is a consequence, but it doesn't come directly like a notification from the DPA authority or something like that. It has to be, it is a power to initiate prosecution ending up with 1 year imprisonment. Plus, you are going to lose whatever protection which may be there under section 79 for other crimes which might have happened. You become automatically co-obligate for other things. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Naavi, Ramesh here, just quickly to add a comment. Sometimes the certain actually also has monitors the public available IPs, and they also send alerts to the individual organization saying that we come to notice that there is some kind of activity.
Yeah, tell me. Go ahead, Ramesh.
Yeah, they say that there are some activities, and they kind of ask in case they have kind of found anything else. They really don't follow it up, but it comes an alert to the institutions and say that take a look at this. So that's where I think one of their encouragement is to participate with them. But again, as we heard, yeah, MNCs does not come forward so easily. And for two reasons. One, as mentioned, reputation as well as the follow-ups. So they don't want to get into that. And of course, their corporate also kind of say that they got more stringent requirements than the local ones. And that's the reason that they do it. And overall, these policies, as Rakesh sir said, it can be implemented. But the question of is wherewithal and the manpower and the process.
Yeah.
So they see it's additional burden than internal processes.
Okay. I think if there are no further questions, we can wind up our session today.
Sir, one last question, not question, remark.
Yeah.
Again, ISO 27001 has a requirement to identify the applicable and relevant laws and regulations, legal
Yes.
regulations.
Yes.
So as part of this, now whatever CERT-IN gives the guidelines, that becomes a requirement.
It becomes requirement. Yes.
So
Agreed.
as part of that, if we have to demonstrate compliance, so we're taking an example of a breach, if that is not reported, it becomes a non-compliant to legal requirements.
Correct.
If it is reported, then it's a question of reputation. So it's a double-edged sword. This
Unfortunately, all data breach reports are like that only, no? And in fact, in HIPAA and other things, you are supposed to put it up on your website. You are supposed to give a notification in newspapers. So you have to yourself tell the world that I lost some data, something like that. That is the life of the organization.
Yes,
You cannot bother too much about reputation because law doesn't recognize that, because larger interests are involved. Public interest is involved. Okay, you can only say that the data will not be misused by certain. So there has to be checks and balances so that certain officials don't misuse. Like in the case of police, sometimes they misuse information given to them in confidence. That should not happen. That is something which certain should assure to the organizations, and you have got the right to ask certain that if I am going to give you all this information, what is the systems you have for keeping it confidential? That is your legitimate right. You can ask them.
Are there any organizations that ask for or request for non-disclosure agreements with certain?
No, say certain you will not sign a non-disclosure agreement because they are a statutory body. They are supposed to do what is possible under law. Okay. If they exceed what is there in the law, you have to go to the court and then try to bring action against them. Okay, they will not sign any non-disclosure, according to me. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thank you, friends. I think if there is any more questions and other things, you can always post it in our group. We will try to continue the discussion and perhaps add more thoughts into it. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.